Hello and welcome to Access Asia here on France 24. Coming up, 1 year after India's agricultural reforms were passed and farmers renew their pledge, unions plan nationwide protests until the laws are repealed. Loads of empty apartments and a massive pile of debt. China's Evergrande is in a full-blown crisis. We'll find out if the property developer is too big to fail. And Thailand is going big on solar energy. Its largest floating plant just connected to the grid, and the country plans to have 8 more of these giants by 2037. Well, it's been 1 year since a series of agriculture bills were rushed through India's parliament. The reforms were meant to empower farmers, but instead they sparked protest. The government was blamed for a lack of transparency and putting millions of people's livelihoods in jeopardy. While the laws have been suspended, talks between unions and officials have stalled. Our team on the ground reports.
This area, several kilometers long, has become the epicenter of the farmers' protest. Hundreds of trucks, tents, and tractors occupy this section of a highway that leads to Delhi. For 10 months now, these farmers are camping out here just outside the Indian capital. Among them is 22-year-old Harpreet Singh.
Long live the farmers! Long live the farmers! These people are our brave farmers. This whole group has come all the way from Punjab. They're walking towards the stage to show they've arrived.
Harpreet and hundreds of thousands of farmers are demanding the rollback of a set of farm reforms passed by the Indian Parliament a year ago. The reforms include 3 laws that seek to liberalize the agricultural sector and open it to private companies. Harpreet, the son of a farmer, has been camped out here since December. These people have braved the cold and pollution of the winter months and the heat and rains of the summer.
People come here in groups. Buses come once a week from Punjab. One group comes to stay for up to 2 weeks, then leaves, then another group comes. We can't stop our farm and housework. This way we can manage both the protest and the work at home.
In the protest camps around New Delhi, the number of demonstrators has gradually decreased, but the mobilization continues. In a bid to attract more people to the cause, this protest has now evolved. A few hundred kilometers from the Indian capital, this is the village of Patri in the state of Haryana. Anand Malik is a farmer like his father and grandfather before him. He's back from the protest camp to inspect his 5 hectares of rice and sugarcane fields.
There is excess water here because it's rained a lot. I need to drain it or the crops will spoil.
Till now, the rice cultivated in India was sold in markets at a minimum price guaranteed by the government, no matter what the quality. This system helped small farmers like Anand and his family survive. But the new laws threaten to end the system. Farmers will be able to directly sell their produce to big private retailers. They fear they won't be able to negotiate with these companies.
In the direct contract system, when we want to sell our product somewhere, if our crops are too ripe or if they're imperfect in any way, they can refuse to take them. Who's going to buy them then?
India's Supreme Court has temporarily blocked these laws from taking effect. But that's not enough for these farmers. Huge gatherings like this one take place regularly in various states to keep the pressure on Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Farmers from Punjab, Haryana, UP, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala are expected to attend the Mega Mahapanchayat that is scheduled to start at 11 a.m. in Muzaffarnagar's GIC.
This is a strategy farmer leaders have adopted to make sure the protest spreads far and wide, as negotiations with the government have stalled. Ravi Azad is a member of India's largest farm union. For several weeks now, he's been going door to door to convince villagers to join the general strike scheduled for the first anniversary of the passing of these laws.
You must come and bring all your female relatives with you.
Yes, of course.
We'll have a national strike.
Absolutely, this is our duty.
The unions are also hoping to influence key elections in India. They are calling on people to reject Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP party.
Now there is no region, religion, or caste. We must begin preparations for a BJP-free India. There are 2 vaccines we have to administer, the first dose in 2022 in Uttar Pradesh, and if that doesn't work, then we have to administer the second one in 2024 to the Modi government in Delhi. Look, if this was a government, they would have listened to us, but India is run by corporations. We will fight until our last breath. We don't care if we die. Whatever happens, we will not stop until we win.
This 10-month-long farmer mobilization is the longest protest in India since the country became independent in 1947.
Well, the downfall of one of China's top real estate developers has sent shockwaves through the global economy. Evergrande has been brought low by a liquidity crisis, unable to come up with enough cash to pay the interest on its massive debt pile. So how did we get here, and what could the fallout be for the global economy? Brian Quinn joins us here from the France 24 business desk to explain. Hello to you, Brian.
Hey, Will.
Take us through, first of all, who this company is, and how did a Chinese real estate developer get so big that its collapse could trigger such a crisis?
Well, Will, over the past dozen or so years, Evergrande has grown into China's second largest property developer by sales. It owns more than 1,300 projects across 280 Chinese cities. At its height, it was building around 600,000 homes per year. We're talking about 200,000 direct employees. Its activity, though, the company says supports around 3.8 million Chinese jobs. And it's not just in real estate. The company owns a major soccer team. They've got a theme park, even an electric vehicle manufacturer. Of course, it financed all that expansion, though, with this massive pile of debt. At the last count, it was about $305 billion worth. Who holds that debt? Well, you've got Chinese apartment buyers, for one. Evergrande has pre-sold at least 1.6 million apartments that have yet to even be built. The company's also sold about $6.2 billion worth of high-yield bonds to Chinese retail investors. It owes $20 billion in offshore dollar-denominated bonds, owes tens of billions to its domestic suppliers, of course. And of course, it owes plenty of money just to Chinese banks.
Yeah, those numbers are very staggering. If it's been building up debt for so long, why is it only coming to a head now?
Well, the arrival of the pandemic in 2019 basically slammed the brakes on what has, for the past 20 years or so, been a very booming Chinese real estate market. The sector is valued at $52 trillion. That accounts for some 29% of the country's gross domestic product. The thing, though, is that the real estate sector is heavily overbuilt. Estimates put the amount of empty housing in China at enough to accommodate 90 million people. In recent years, the country's housing bubble has become a cause of real concern, in fact, for the country's top leadership. In August of last year, Beijing unveiled a new policy aimed at reining in developer debt that they called the 3 red lines. That requires that a company's liabilities not exceed 70% of its assets, puts a 100% cap on net debt to equity, and it requires companies to have at least as much cash on hand as they owe in short-term debt. Now, to meet those rules, Evergrande started selling assets and offering steep discounts. This past June, the government put new restrictions, in fact, on pre-sales for unbuilt homes. By August, we were starting to see suppliers sue Evergrande for unpaid bills. So, in a way, you could call it a crisis of the government's making. But in fact, it's an attempt to avoid a worse crisis if this heavily leveraged housing bubble were allowed to continue running wild.
Well, let's look down the road. What does this mean for the Chinese economy and indeed the global economy?
Well, what you hear all the time around this story is this a Lehman Brothers moment? Meaning, could this spark another global financial crisis? For now, the general consensus is no. One major reason for that is that international exposure to Evergrande debt is relatively limited. Another being that China's financial system, in fact, very tightly controlled centrally. If Beijing wants to, it can force banks to lend to each other. It can enforce capital controls. These are tools that Western economies generally don't use. Longer term risk, though, is that China's real estate sector stops being an engine of growth. Now, Chinese growth overall accounted for a quarter of worldwide GDP expansion from 2013 to 2018. If that drops really far, you're going to see palpable effects across the global economy. Beijing, of course, hoping it can offset this real estate measures with growth in high-tech and green energy. But of course, it remains to be seen if that's going to work.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Brian Quinn from France 24's Business Desk. Well, to Thailand now, where the country's largest floating solar plant was recently connected to the grid. It spans 121 hectares. The company behind it said the plant will only have a minimal negative effect on the lake's flora and fauna. Wasim Cornet takes a look.
It's Thailand's new energy powerhouse. Thousands of solar panels floating on water. 144,417 of them, to be precise. Just a few weeks ago, the system was finally connected to the Thai power grid, generating enough electricity for more than 100,000 people. And that's just the beginning. Thailand wants to create 8 more of these giant solar farms by 2037. Sawita Shituk was the project manager for this huge endeavor. According to engineers and scientists, floating solar panels are more efficient than panels on land, as the energy produced tends to decrease in extreme heat.
The water can cool down of the temperature to make the power yield upper more than a solar farm on land. And this area is far from the dust, then the efficiency will go up.
Another major advantage is the space being used. This solar farm on water has been set up on an artificial lake that was made possible thanks to a dam nearby. Solar farms on land, however, use up thousands of square kilometers that could be used for housing or farming. But setting up solar panels on water is more expensive. These pictures are from last spring, when the system was being built. More manpower is needed, and the added cost of floats needs to be factored in, making the total price tag 10 to 20% higher than conventional solar farms. Some $25 million were spent on this system alone.
I'm very proud to be working here. This solar farm will be a point of pride for the country.
The power produced here will be sent to nearby plants thanks to underwater cables. Similar systems are being set up in China, South Korea, and in Singapore. According to the World Bank, these floating solar farms will play a big part in powering our planet in the future.
Well, that's it for this edition. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned to France 24.